Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and the final season of Dragonflight is finally here, giving you the final chance to obtain some of the seasonal mounts, rewards, cosmetics, and other achievements, but also an opportunity to experience our characters at their strongest, using the best equipment from all three raids of Dragonflight. It's also a final opportunity to gear up before the next expansion, as endgame gear in Season 4 is going to make that leveling journey through War Within a ton easier. And over the next few weeks, I want to cover all three rogue specs since this is my favorite class of this expansion, and I decided that my first guide should probably go over the most popular pick first. Outlaw has found itself leading only slightly ahead because of some of the earlier Dragonflight raids like Vault of the Incarnates for its cleave encounters, and while the spec won't ever hold a candle to Subtlety in pure single target fights, it does make a notable headway in Mythic Plus content, making it this season's most popular spec at the time of making of this video. Though I'm sure that lead will shrink over time as Subtlety tends to scale with the best endgame gear available. Though I still wanted to highlight Outlaw Rogue for Season 4 and help you guys get started playing this pirated brigand. But right before we dive into this guide, most of you guys watching these kind of update videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do, so let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway. Especially if you want to get more regular content regarding Dragonflight patch 10.26, 10.7, Season 4, or any of the future War Within updates. First, let's go over how to outfit your rogue for Season 4. If you're serious about playing rogues in Season 4 and beyond, it is highly recommended to use Sims in order to get the most accurate data when it comes to gearing out your character. In the description of this video, I have a link to the SimBots add-on that takes your character's entire profile, which you can plug directly into the RaidBots website. There you can compare all of your current gear that you have in the bag against one another to find out which item sets are going to be the best for your character, and also find which items are going to be your best upgrades from raids and dungeons, and simulate encounters such as single target raids or dungeons, or just how much damage you should be able to achieve when hitting trained dummies in the capital city. Sims are infinitely useful, but if you prefer a more simpler way of gearing out your character, then this video will go over some of the best stats, best weapons and trinkets, and other items you can collect for this season. When it comes to stat optimizations, usually item level is king when it comes to gearing out a new character with gear upgrades. But as for the secondary stats for Outlaw, you're looking to prioritize versatility, critical strike, a little bit of haste, and as little of mastery as possible. When it comes to gear, we have a few options depending whether you plan to gear through raids or through dungeons or both for Season 4. First, we have raid gear, and within Dragonflight Season 4 raids, we have a new currency called Antique Bronze Bullions. As you slay bosses in Season 4, you'll be able to earn this currency, and you can trade in 2 bullions for a powerful awakened item that drops from any of the 3 raids of Dragonflight, which makes raid gearing a lot easier since the new currency offers some bad luck protection. Some of the best items you're looking to get from raid on your Outlaw Rogue to buy with bullions will either be the Thorn Caller's Claw, which is probably your best weapon that you can obtain from any of the 3 raids. If you're looking for a trinket, the Manic Reef Roach ends up being one of the better choices for single target or cleave situations, though if you're primarily focused on M+ content, then Storm Eater's Boon will offer quite a bit extra AoE output. Besides this, we also have rings such as the Seal of Diurnus Chosen, which is one of the better rings that you can obtain for the season, as well as the Voice of the Silent Star Cloak, which lets you trade out stamina for additional secondary stats. When it comes to dungeon gearing, we have access to the 8 original Dragonflight dungeons, plus the Dawn of the Infinite Mythic dungeon, as well as the hard mode version of that instance, which offers a more difficult version of the fights, but also far better rewards with the hero track quality. When it comes to weapons, Forge Storm from Naltharis will be one of the better weapons that you can obtain from this season. Another item worth your time will be the dagger called Nick of Time, which can be gotten from the second boss of Dawn of the Infinite. Another weapon worth going after will be Refraction's Edge, which is one of the better weapons that has the perfect stat layout for Outlaw. Finally, when it comes to trinkets, we have the Globe of Jagged Ice, which you can obtain from Halls of Infusion. You also want to get your hands on your tier set as soon as possible for Season 4. In Season 4, Outlaw Rogues will get to reuse the bonuses from the Emergency tier. For the most part, our tier set doesn't really offer many gameplay changes, just fantastic passives that make managing things like Roll the Bones a lot easier. You can get a chance at tier piece tokens by slaying bosses in awakened raids. Additionally, filling out your Great Vault with as many options as possible for the week gives you more chances to proc a tier set in one of these slots. And finally, the last way to obtain tier sets is by converting your Season 4 items into tier set equivalents using the Revival Catalyst. Every single week we get one charge of the Catalyst, which means as I'm making of this video, you should have 2 charges available to at least make your 2 set bonus once you get some Season 3 gear. Only items that are helms, shoulders, chest, legs, and glove slots can be turned into items with an actual tier set bonus. Other items can also be used within the Revival Catalyst to convert some of their secondary stats, but they will not have secondary bonuses. Next, we have a quick note on crafted items, and if you want to play all 3 specs of Rogue in this season, I suggest you grab the Toxic Thorn Foot Wraps as your prime embellishment, as well as another item with a Toxified Armor Patch to amplify the Toxic Boots embellishment. Toxic Thorn Foot Pads technically is your best option for pure single target as an Outlaw Rogue, but it ends up being a fantastic embellishment that works with all 3 specs of Rogue as well. However, if you want to primarily focus on Mythic Plus this season as an Outlaw Rogue, you could also substitute that for 2 Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch crafted items, by crafting 2 leather pieces and then adding the Shadowflame embellishment into the embellishment slot. And to complete our gear and items, we have weapon and armor enchants, which all of them you can buy on the auction house or craft them yourself if you are an enchanter. For weapon, we'll either go with Sophic or Wafting Devotion. Where Wafting is a little bit better in single target, Sophic is better in AoE. Either sim your character or slap both of them on either one of your weapons to make sure that you're covered in all situations. For our cloaks and bracer, we're gonna go with Avoidance to give us a bit extra defense. Boots are gonna be enchanted with Plain Runner's Breeze for a little bit extra speed. Rings are going to have Versatility as our best secondary stat. Chest will have Awakened stats for additional stats for combat. Shadow Belt clasp will go on our waist for additional stamina. Our pants are going to be enhanced with the Fierce Armor Kit for additional stamina and agility. And then we have the Incandescence Essence for our helmet slot, which is part of a quest line that you get inside of the Emergency raid. And lastly, to complete the shopping list, we have an array of consumables which will amp up your character's output inside of raids and dungeons. First of all, you want to pick up a file. Either go with Versatility if you want a decent defensive file, but if you're fine doing a little bit more damage but putting yourself in danger, Corrupting Rage can give you a little bit extra overall output. Buzzing Runes will go on our weapons to provide us with additional critical strike, and Deviously Deviled Eggs are generally cheap enough to buy on the auction house and provide you with the food buff for primary stats. For potions, for the most part, we want to use the Elemental Potions of Ultimate Power and Dreamwalker's Healing Potion for defensives. For gem slots, you'll want to have at least one of them socketed with the Resplendent Illuminated Diamond, which needs to be crafted by a jewel crafter through the work order system, provides you primary stats as well as additional versatility. The rest of your gem slots can be slotted with Radiant Malachite. Finally, we have the alternative to Augment Runes, which is the Dreambound Augment Rune, which is an Augment Rune item that you can use as much as you want to, and it doesn't get consumed upon use. This one you can obtain after you reach rank 18 with the Dream Wardens faction in the Emerald Dream. Next, let's go over my favorite part, which are going to be the talent and talent builds that you'll be able to use in raids and dungeons. I'll have every single one of the talents shown here in the description of this video so you can import them directly onto your character in the talent loadout. To do that, you'll just open up the talents. You'll be able to copy the actual string that I give, and then when you go to import, you'll paste the string in the import text, and you can name the talent build whatever you want to. First of all, we have the raiding build, which is going to be a hidden opportunity build that's going to be prioritizing the ability of ambush as part of your basic rotation. This build will be focused for the most part on outputting the most amount of single target damage as possible, though there is a slight adjustment you can do in the class tree from lethality into 1 point into acrobatic strikes if you want to have a little bit extra convenience of extra range on the enemy. Certain mechanics make it a little bit hard to actually get in melee range of the bosses, so if you like a little bit extra range, acrobatic strikes can add a bit of extra comfort. But if you're fine with a melee range, you should definitely run lethality to output the most amount of damage as possible. And the best advantages of this build is it provides consistent single target damage and the most amount of single target damage out there, while providing you with a little bit extra mobility, protection, and everything you need in order to be able to output competitive single target output. Then we have the Mythic Plus Dungeon build, which is going to revolve around a handful of abilities. The first one will be Keep It Rolling, which adds a new mechanic towards the Roll the Bones that is unique for this build. Keep It Rolling essentially allows you to lock in a good set of buffs and prolong them for as long as possible, and with a 7-minute cooldown, plus the cooldown reduction that's natural to Outlaw, it's actually going to be roughly 3 to 4 minute cooldown, but it makes for some excellent output in dungeons. Another ability you're going to play around is going to be Echo and Reprimand. The ability adds you an enemy charge calm point mechanic, which isn't difficult to pick up, but it is going to adjust your rotation a little bit and make you pay attention to that mechanic specifically. Part of this playstyle, you're also going to be able to use Blade Flurry to generate combo points when cleaving multiple targets, which makes the rotation so much faster in large group and high target count situations. Either of the single target or the dungeon builds are going to utilize a primary mechanic of Crackshot, where during stealth, vanish, as well as shadow dance, Between the Eyes has no cooldown and will also dispatch the target for free for a portion of its damage when used from stealth. This will essentially create a loop where we will try to find stealth windows and vanish windows in order to be able to get as many Between the Eyes uses as possible, which allows us to gain calm points and cooldowns super quickly, thanks to the Outlaw Rogue's cooldown reduction mechanic. Now let's start going over the rotation and the playstyle of the Outlaw Rogue. Before we get into the actual abilities you'll be utilizing for your base gameplay, let's go over the Roll the Bones mechanic, which is the primary buff mechanic of this spec. Being able to learn how to properly play around Roll the Bones is crucial to being able to gain the most amount of success on your Outlaw Rogue. So I set together a couple of rules that you need to follow in order to be effective with your Outlaw and Roll the Bones. When you press Roll the Bones, you gain a random combination of buffs, either 1 buff, 2 buff, or a 5 buff combo, with a 5 buff being the most rare one. Thanks to our tier set, however, we can control Roll the Bones a little bit, because every time we use the ability, we also get to refresh our random Roll the Bone buffs that we always have active at all times, allowing us to retain at minimum 2 buffs at a time, which is going to be far more effective than having 1 buff at a time. For the most part, the rules around Roll the Bones are simple. You want to re-roll this ability whenever you have 0 buffs available. You also want to re-roll Roll the Bones when you have just 1 buff available to utilize the value of our foreset. To keep that value of our foreset, you also want to use Roll the Bones when you have 2 buffs active and you have the buff of Loaded Dice active. Loaded Dice is achieved from the talent of Loaded Dice. Whenever we activate Adrenaline Rush, we also gain a buff that allows our Roll the Bones to have guaranteed at least 2 buffs at a time. And the final rule of Roll the Bones is you want to re-roll whatever buffs you have if they have roughly 7 seconds or less in duration and your Vanish or Dance stealth windows are about to be active. Essentially, you just want to refresh your buffs to make sure you don't have to do that inside of your Vanish or Dance windows. Next, we have the ability of Keep It Rolling, which will only be active inside of our M+ build. Keep It Rolling basically increases the remaining duration of all of our active buffs by 30 seconds. And the best way to use Keep It Rolling in Season 4 is if you have 4 or more buffs active at once. Thanks to talents such as Count the Odds, using abilities such as Ambush, Sinistrike, and Dispatch, there's a fairly small chance that you'll be able to get a random Roll the Bones buff for 5 seconds. So if you see 4 buffs at a time, use Keep It Rolling as soon as you can, as it does have some cooldown reduction enabled with Restless Blades, as where we spend combo points, we get to reduce the cooldown of many of our abilities, Keep It Rolling included. So you should be using this ability pretty aggressively as soon as you catch yourself with 4 buffs or more. Next, let's go over some of the cooldowns of Outlaw Rogue, starting with Blade Flurry. Blade Flurry is how Outlaw Rogue deals AoE damage. With Blade Flurry, you strike nearby enemies, turning all of your single target abilities into cleave damage with Blade Flurry. Essentially, as Outlaw Rogue, we just learn a single target rotation, and for our playstyle, we just execute our single target rotation at all times. And whenever we're hitting more than 1 target, we just enable Blade Flurry as soon as possible, so you want to try to maintain Blade Flurry almost up at all times. Blade Flurry should also be maintained even in single target because of the underhanded upper hand talent. During underhanded upper hand, Slice and Dice does not lose duration during Blade Flurry, and Blade Flurry doesn't lose duration during Adrenaline Rush, which gives us a little bit of a combo where if Adrenaline Rush is active, we should maintain Blade Flurry because that allows our Slice and Dice to have a far longer duration. As for the ability of Adrenaline Rush, for the most part, we want to get the most out of this ability and use it as much as possible. Ideally, an Outlaw Rogue should aim to have roughly 80% uptime of Adrenaline Rush. This can be achieved with a couple of ways, such as the underhanded upper hand, which allows Adrenaline Rush to not lose duration while in stealth. And we'll be using Vanish and Shadow Dance windows, which grant us stealth, pretty aggressively to gain the most amount of combo points to reduce the cooldown of abilities such as Adrenaline Rush so we can get the most value out of it. During Adrenaline Rush, your energy regen rate is greatly increased, your maximum energy is also increased, and your attack speed is increased, making it the ultimate cooldown of Outlaw Rogues. Adrenaline Rush also does a handful of things, like with improved Adrenaline Rush, it generates full combo points when used, so in a way we can also use Adrenaline Rush to build combo points. For the most part, you do want to maintain Adrenaline Rush as much as possible, and you don't really want to refresh the buff early until it completely falls off. The only time you would actually refresh Adrenaline Rush early is in stealth in order to generate combo points to use inside of our stealth windows. Then we have the ability of Vanish, which grants us a momentary stealth, but also provides us with Subterfuge. Subterfuge allows us the use of Stealth State and Stealth based abilities for 3 seconds, with this duration slightly extended with the underhanded upper hand talent, giving us 6 seconds of a stealth-like state. During stealth, we have 0 cooldown on our ability of Between the Eyes. With Ace Up Your Sleeve, Between the Eyes also has a chance per combo point spent to grant you combo points instantly. In a way, as you spend combo points on the Between the Eyes, it has a chance to regenerate it all over again, letting you chain multiple Between the Eyes in a row, which is something you'll want to keep a track of rotationally. As for the cooldown of Shadow Dance, it essentially does the same thing as Vanish. It provides us with a stealth state. For the most part, we'll try to use Vanish before using Shadow Dance because even though Vanish got a longer cooldown reduction of Outlaw makes it a far shorter CD than the minute CD of Shadow Dance. Finally, the last cooldown worth mentioning is Blade Rush, which is a 45-second cooldown that does a bit of damage and allows us to generate a little bit of energy after using the ability. We won't be using Blade Rush all that often, and the only times you really want to use it is if you're extremely low on energy. So it ends up being a very situational ability that doesn't get nearly as much use as one may think. Next, we have combo point builders and spenders. An Outlaw Rogue, like every other rogue spec, is always going to aim to try to build combo points and spend them as efficiently as possible. So here are some of the rules behind finishers and the builders, starting with the finishers. For the most part, you'll try to use your finishers as an Outlaw Rogue once you reach 6 combo points. This, however, changes a little bit inside of your stealth and vanish windows, where it's perfectly fine to use your finishers at 5 combo points or more. The first finisher is Between the Eyes, which should ideally be used on cooldown as much as possible. This will be our primary finisher inside of a stealth or a Shadow Dance window. And while you should also be using Between the Eyes outside of stealth as well, you should hold on to it if Vanish is coming up in roughly 45 seconds, or if Shadow Dance is going to be made available in 12 seconds or less. Otherwise, we want to maintain Slice and Dice at all times as a constant auto attack speed buff for our rogue. And you really want to refresh Slice and Dice if it's below 12 seconds in duration. Though, a lot of the times as Outlaw, you won't have to worry about refreshing Slice and Dice if you're playing around the underhanded upper hand talent, which allows Slice and Dice to not lose duration while Blade Flurry is active, and Blade Flurry will be paired with Adrenaline Rush, so for the most part you shouldn't have to refresh Slice and Dice too often. Besides this, if the other finishers are not available, you'll be using Dispatch in order to spend your combo points whenever you hit 5 combo points or 6 inside of stealth windows. Next, let's go over the builders, which are a little bit different depending if you're playing the single target rating build or the Mythic Plus build. Starting with the rating build, you will be using the ability of Ghost Strike as often as possible. Essentially, you'll be using it on cooldown as long as you don't overcap on your combo points. Otherwise, Ambush will be your primary ability that you'll want to use as often as possible. Ambush can be used only inside of stealth, or if you get an Audacity proc with your half-cost shots of pistol shots, and you'll want to use Ambush even if you are at 5 combo points outside of stealth windows. Then we have the ability of Pistol Shot, which for the most part is second in priority of Ambush, except when one of your buffs from Roll the Bones is broadside and it's currently active. Another condition that also must be met is from Fan the Hammer, which allows your pistol shots to build up multiple stacks of opportunity. So if you have broadside and at least 6 stacks of opportunity, then pistol shot is going to actually take priority over ambush when it comes to common point builders. Otherwise, if ambush is not available, you'll be using pistol shot whenever opportunity stacks are available, and you're free to use pistol shot even if you're sitting at 5 common points outside of a stealth window. When ambush isn't available and pistol shot does not have opportunity procs, you'll resort to using Sinister Strike during downtime to build common points. Next, we have the Mythic Plus build. When it comes to builders for Mythic Plus, you'll also start incorporating Blade Flurry as a way for you to generate common points quickly. You'll try to use Blade Flurry whenever you're fighting 3+ targets as your top priority common point builder, just because the amount of sheer common points that this ability can build is quite a lot, and trying to use this ability as often as possible to spend common points will help you put the ability on cooldown so you can use it back quicker. Otherwise, the priority for the most part is going to be the same, with Ghost Strike taking priority as a 1 common point builder, followed by Echo and Reprimand, which is an interesting ability with a 45-second cooldown that also anima charges your common points. When your common points are anima charged, it means that they are gonna have this blue glow around them. So using a finisher on a glowing common point will treat it as if you spend 7 common points into that finisher instead of 3 common points, 4 common points, or a 5 common point finisher. So if I build Sinister Strikes and I land on a blue common point, you're free to use a finisher on it. Mostly you'll want to use your offensive finishers such as Between the Eyes or Dispatch. Slice and Dice doesn't get any value, so try to primarily focus on your offensive finishers for those blue combo points. Otherwise, when neither of these 2 abilities are available, you'll be using Pistol Shot again with opportunity procs. There's a bit of a nuance around how to maximize the value of pistol shots. Essentially, you don't really want to over-generate common points with opportunity because it is so lucrative. So as I'm sitting at 5 common points, I have 3 stacks of opportunity, I'll use a Sinister Strike to try to see if I can maybe use a finisher and then utilize an opportunity proc pistol shots in order to not waste on those common points. Like right here, I have 4 common points and I have pistol shot, but I am going to use Sinister Strike to try to see if I can build common points and then try not to waste the common points you can get from your pistol shot. There's definitely a little bit of nuance behind pistol shots and trying to maximize its procs, but if you are ever at max opportunity stacks, pistol shot should always be your #1 priority whenever it's available. Also, the Mythic Plus build does not use ambush from stealth at all. Ambush doesn't get... Since you're not picking up any talents that have any kind of synergy with ambush whatsoever, you won't be using ambush even in stealth. Instead, you'll resort to Sinister Strikes, pistol shots, Echo and Reprimand, and Ghost Strike from your openers. Next, let's go over the opener that you would utilize as an Outlaw Rogue in single target or AoE situations. For your opener, you kind of want to lock in your buffs as best. For your opener, you want to be able to lock in your buffs, establish Slice and Dice, maximize the value of Blade Flurry as well as Adrenaline Rush. To do that, we're going to be using Roll the Bones into a Blade Flurry, into Adrenaline Rush, Slice and Dice, and Stealth. And while in Stealth with upper-handed, underhanded, we don't lose value on our Adrenaline Rush, Blade Flurry, or Slice and Dice, allowing us to have all those buffs available during our opener. Also, before every combat encounter, make sure your Instant Poison as well as your Traffic Poison or Numbing Poison are active. And then you go in with an opener for a raiding build with an Ambush Ghost Strike into your Stealth window, where you for the most part are going to prioritize using Between the Eyes as often as possible and follow your reroll priority whenever it's available. When it comes to Mythic Plus, your opener isn't going to be all that different. Instead of opening with an ambush, you'll start with Echo and Reprimand into Ghost Strike into Between the Eyes, and then from there you'll go into your normal rotation, still following the Roll the Bones rules, as well as your stealth windows in order to get the most value out of your Between the Eyes combos. But besides all that, this is going to be everything you need to know in order to pick up your Outlaw Rogue. Definitely not the easiest version of this spec by any measure from any of the last few previous expansions, but once you pick up some of the nuances and figure out how to play around the crackshot windows, this spec really does take off. It's a fast-paced spec with a lot of decision-making, moment-to-moment gameplay, and the amount of raw damage that the spec can crank out in both raids as well as in dungeons, as especially in dungeons, is impressive all on its own. Outlaw is definitely at its peak in Season 4 and is doing fantastically well so far, and I cannot wait to see what the spec is going to look like and how it's going to evolve in the War Within Alpha. But otherwise, I want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope all of you enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts about this guide in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.